Welcome to the show today in our continuing conversations with Joe Visconti. It is so wonderful to get a chance to talk with you, especially with the topic that you've helped us craft today, which I'm putting in the words, the descent and ascent of mankind, which to me means cosmology. And you partake in the great cosmology of Rudolf Steiner, but I'm sure that you've studied other cosmologies. So today, I think we're going to address this concept of cosmology, which is absolutely critical because if you don't know where you came from and you don't know where you're going, where are you at? I mean, you really need to know who you are in time, and that's going to be spelled out for you in whatever cosmology you develop. So how did you come up to relating to the cosmology of Steiner?
In a series of 4 to 6 years, a complete, I'm sorry I'm so long-winded here, but a complete synthesis of me respecting God, loving God, knowing there's more than they can tell us they don't know, or they're keeping it a secret. And I felt that the church was keeping secrets, even though it was little, because it was Latin Mass when I first started going. And so my cosmogony started to ask the question where, as I'm sure all children do, but many of them give up that wonder, which John Barnwell, who completely studies the wonders of the world, which is unbelievable, a sequence of lectures. And it is that wondering, which is actually, for those who study Rudolf Steiner, one of the bodies of Christ is being formed by the wonders of men when we wonder. So anyway, it was 4 to 6 years where I developed in a free time in a different age than we live, where authorities were not that powerful or dogmatic or leaning on you, the church nor education. And between the new city life and the childhood life in the jungle, I was a jungle boy, climbed trees and tree forts and lived out with the cows. I knew the answers were there. I knew people knew. I knew some people were keeping them secret. And education in school that taught us about astronomy and the Big Bang, did not believe that. I said, this is no way that the beauty came. And then as I looked at my body growing from 4 to 8 to 9 years old, I noticed my clothes didn't fit, as we all do. And I said, well, who's doing this to me? When will it stop? And what will I look like? And I looked in the mirror, and what is governing this? And I knew it was the same thing connected to what was doing it in the outer world, in nature and the stars and trees. And that's when reincarnation came to me, very, really young age. And I said, oh, my body, because I heard people, death, you're going to die, it's forever. My cousin came over from Hartford, and he said a swear word in the woods. And I said, we're going to go to hell, he said, because we swore. We have to go to church. I'm like, God would put us to hell? What kind of God is this? I don't believe that. And I thought, I want to swear, but as a young age, again, so that came in with the authority of the church that we're going to go to hell because we sinned. It didn't make sense to me. I was free to decide myself. My parents were very, busy and open, and they didn't really lean on us with that. And so those forces all came into being. Watching also how my friends in politics, unbelievably young age, were so addicted, their families, to trying to make the world a better place. This was the liberal agenda in the West End of Hartford. A man named Ritter. He created in the late 1940s. He was an attorney and a Quaker, and all of his sons to this day are in government, majority House leaders, their grandchildren. And I was fascinated that they were so interested in helping people. And I saw that very liberal. I mean, it came out of Hartford, Connecticut. Most people don't know that. Again, in juxtaposition to the church and the confession and all of that, which wasn't forced on us, but I was able to pick and choose it. I was not leaned on to do it in any discipline because my parents couldn't drive. And I was a kid who was an adult that did so many things for the family. So I had my own authority. I had tried to weave between the authorities of the world, the knowledge of the world. And then one day I came home from school. I had delivered the Hartford Courant and the Hartford Times in the morning and the afternoon. And in the front page, I came home for lunch. We lived across the street from our school, Noah Webster Elementary. And the front page was Edgar Casey, a picture of him holding his ear. And my mother turned to me and said, this is probably 9 years old, Joey, do you believe in reincarnation? Because this man right here, and I saw the newspaper I delivered, and I said, Mom, I've been thinking about that for years. And when my body grows and everything, I wonder why it grows and how, if it will stop. And that made me think, could I be in a body again that grows like this if I'm here once? And I thought about this and I worked through it and I thought, the only reason is people don't remember. And I said, so if we don't remember if we lived before beyond memory, we could be in different bodies. That became the who am I? And my task was, who do I want to be? What do I want to say in the world? And as all of us look at our role models, the Beatles, movie stars, this and that, you try to look at your, and I knew enough to say, why do I like this person and that person? And so all of it coming together, my mother started to move away from the church and went to the Philosophers Forum, where they would bring us at 10, 11, 12 years old to experience and see Yogi Satchidananda, levitation, you name it, in the late 60s, early 70s. It was happening, gurus. And so I was exposed to all that, but still I maintained Jesus. The rituals we talked about in the last program, I knew there was much more than could be understood by me and by the world. And then my mother found Rudolf Steiner's books in the Hartford Seminary, where the priests get their books in Hartford, the West End. Again, we're next to my school. And she brought it home and started reading from Steiner to us in 72. And I went, that's it. This is the man who knows. And I had a left brain developed education where where I could, I picked it up and I could read it easily. And that began in 1972. This is the man since 1960 to 1970, 12 years that has the answers. And I'm going to have to be patient because it's not going to come to me. It's too much. I knew that instinctively. And I've always been patient to try to build a world cosmogony, world conception that we all should be building. Education took us one way. Our parents may have forced us a different way. But we all need to keep that free space in our mind and our heart that says, not belligerently or in revolution, but they don't know. I don't know. But I don't want anybody stepping in here telling me to believe it. And if they make me do school, and I did, and got A's and B's in honor society, I'll do what they ask me to do, but I don't believe it. It's a lie, and it's improper. It's not complete, and it's probably not even real. So I will make sure that I defend my consciousness and don't take their drug to do something to my brain. I can't get my free brain back. I knew that in grade school. That's about it. That's about the beginnings of how I formed my own search for Rudolf Steiner.
Well, you went astray, didn't you, young Joe? So I'm going to go back to Catholic Catechism, which is a cosmology, the one that they tried to brainwash you with. And we're going to go over and get you brainwashed again. So here we go. Who made you? Your answer is God. Don't give me your answers. I will tell you your answers. What else did God make? God made all things. Why did God make all things? For his own glory. Why do these things work as they do? God has so decreed it. How do we learn about God? God reveals himself. Where does God reveal himself? In his word and his nature. What does God reveal in nature? His character, law, wrath. Don't you remember your catechism? You're not supposed to think about that. You're supposed to believe it. You're supposed to repeat it. And you're supposed to be an automaton. And this is a cosmology, but they never once, I know this because unfortunately I used to teach this as well as be subjected to it for a long time. They never tell you what God is except omnipresent, omnipotent, omnipotent, everything. But wait. How does God reveal himself? Well, to Moses in a burning bush. I haven't seen any burning bush. So as you go through this brainwashing, if you wake up, you're going to have to, in today's age, because Rudolf Steiner said that in the West, a clear thinking person, if they do not have illness in their thinking, will automatically arrive at the a priori assumption of reincarnation. A healthy thinking person must come to reincarnation. That's just all there is to it. And also, before you get to reincarnation, what led you to logically figure it out? You started to see that karma is everywhere. What you sow, you reap. Karma. So if there's karma, well, what happens when you don't resolve the books before you die? Well, there's reincarnation. Don't worry about it. So we today, as we're talking about cosmology, have the benefit that Rudolf Steiner describes not only who God is, but who the Trinity is, how the Trinity works through a hierarchy of 9 spiritual ranks of beings, and we're the 10th rank, and we're climbing up that rank. And he describes where we came from in absolute detail, all the way up to the present, and then why we're here, what we're about, and where we're going. And so far into the future and so far into the past that it's the complete picture. And if you don't have that, then you don't really know who you are right now, because you don't have a picture of the past and the picture of the future that's coherent, that makes sense to you. And everyone's got a different cosmology. As a matter of fact, we developed one. Well, going over cultural history, there's cycles that Rudolf Steiner pointed out, that Oswald Spengler wrote about, my friend William Irwin Thompson wrote about, Gene Gebser wrote about. A lot of people wrote about these cycles, and they're like the ones that Rudolf Steiner laid out: ancient India, ancient Persia, ancient Mesopotamia, Greco-Roman, and basically you go through these stages in different periods of time. But to understand that, the best way to do it is to become a Waldorf teacher. So we had to, when we were explaining that it's right in your body, all of the past, the present, and the whole future is in your etheric body. Now that seems impossible to believe, but as a Waldorf teacher, that's what we teach to the children. We teach them these periods as they develop through what's called ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. In other words, the development of the individual recapitulates the development of humanity as a whole. So in the Waldorf school, we have to teach the child up to 8th grade, and then they become a citizen of their own time. But up to that, they're in ancient times, and we're trying to teach their etheric body what the etheric body needs to grow properly. So
we can see that in the stages of the development of the embryo. Rudolf Steiner speaks about that, how each epoch, what the human being will look like. And some of it's a horror show if you look at the beginnings of embryos, but this is how we developed. Also, a recapitulation happens every time a human is born. And you see so much of Rudolf Steiner, think he's repeating himself, but so many lectures are, whoever he's speaking to is the beginning of, on Saturn, on Sun, on Moon, and he is always bringing us back to reinforce this, not dogma, but to reinforce this truth, because it all is within ourselves.
yes, and so as we're a Waldorf teacher, we have to teach this to the children. Well, most of us don't know it. So we put out a book to help parents, teachers have a curriculum that you can study at the same time as you're trying to give this wisdom of their own etheric body to the child through using the great images and pictures of cultural development over history. And so we put it in a book called Eternal Curriculum. But this book can't be understood really unless you understand the etheric body, because that's what you're teaching. So from birth to 7, it's the physical body. From 7 to 14, you're teaching the etheric body. From 14 to 21, you're teaching the astral body, and on, basically replicating the 9 bodies of the human being as they are mirroring the donations of the spiritual hierarchy, the celestial hierarchy. And that's why a cosmology works. It explains the macrocosm, everything outside of you, as it relates to the microcosm, what's inside of you. So you can't do that unless you have a cosmology. And today they call a cosmology a theory of everything, a TOE, a toe. And there are many toes out there, all of them severely inadequate. They keep falling back to Einstein, but then they don't recognize the light ether. What Einstein said, the a priori assumption is that everything is based upon the speed of light. That is a misconception that is grotesque, and it's based. And then you talk to any scientist, and they'll say there's no such thing as a luminiferous ether. And then you show them where Einstein said, as you're beginning this theory, you must understand that there is a carrier substance that all light travels through, and that is the luminiferous ether. I can't explain it, but it's there. And he also said there's gravity, and now they're finding out there's gravity. So they're finding out some of this. But if you don't know that there's the 7 ethers, and there's 7 incarnations of the earth, and that you can look at yourself as a 7-fold being in time and a 12-fold being in space, and if you don't know that your own organs replicate the action of the planets, that your own head replicates the action of the zodiacal constellations, that your body replicates the action of all the stars raying into you from interstellar space, then really you don't know who you are, and you really can't thank the hierarchy for donating your body, because as you noticed when you woke up and you said, well, I'm not doing all this growing. You are looking at the hierarchy's donations. They're active donations, which are hidden in nature, but they're still there. You just have to have new supersensible organs to be able to perceive it. But if you perceive a growing child from birth until death, you will understand a very big part of the etheric body, because the etheric body is old when you're born, and it becomes younger and younger and younger and knows less and less and less until the time you die, which is the opposite of what we think about space and time. But the etheric body is levity. It is the opposite of time. It participates in what's called endurance. And that's the reason we use the name eternal curriculum, because the etheric body doesn't change. We add to it all the time, the future, but that future's already been written. The basic cosmology is that our spiritual nature has been held up in the spiritual realm, and we are basically inheriting it as we grow towards it. So we descended down here, and now we're ascending. But the fact of the matter is there's no time and there's no space. So if we would get over that and just go to consciousness, you'd be able to take on your angelic nature, your archangelic nature, your time spirit nature. You'd be able to climb the ladder of the hierarchy. So that's why we created this book. The Eternal Ethers, A Theory of Everything, which is, of course, a toe. This is strictly based upon Rudolf Steiner's interpretation of ancient wisdom, and all we did was try to make it clear for people, try to make it simple enough that you won't get lost in the jargon, and that you always know that all you have to do is come back to your heart, because that all cosmology is based upon love. That every true cosmology I know is based upon the highest beings are what? The beings of love, the beings who sacrifice, who donate. All those beings have sacrificed and donated for us. Our thing now is to accept it, be conscious of it, and then to start to develop our thinking, feeling, and willing in ways that go into imagination, inspiration, and intuition, as Rudolf Steiner calls it, but basically higher thinking, feeling, and willing. And how do you do that? You love God, Goddess, the divine, and you love yourself, and you love your neighbor. That's it. And it's all one law. That's all there is.
Well, the getting into, I hate to say the word politics, because today the theory of politics, the theory of everything is politics now. Can't get away from it. They have absorbed Nashville, Hollywood, academia. They've absorbed Wall Street, media, everything. It's like one Leviathan just sucking everything in, and rules, regulations, government. So getting into education, where you are from, and I call it the education cartel. That's my political, I actually named it. President Trump mentioned it at a rally. I named it in 2005, published the education cartel, and it is a cartel. And when you alluded to the fact that if you left a child alone, they would come to the understanding of reincarnation and many things on their own. So then we start to see the creation of education. Again, I don't want to knock education, because it's important. It is everything, but that's why they went after it, and to put the children's minds into prisons. And part of their job, and I don't mean the teachers or even those who, there's probably 3 or 4 people that know what the truth, the spiritual effect is on the human being by education system. Most others are going along thinking it's beneficial and thinking anything that doesn't work is a side effect, like a pharmaceutical drug that you see the side effects on the TV commercials. And that's what they deal with it. Nothing's perfect. It's not a perfect world. We're trying to do good. But part of this is to actually attempt, it's not an attempt, it's more than an attempt, to take the child and take that information that's inherent and obliterate it, crush the child. And this is what I recognize at a young age. Their want to make me, it's do their thinking, believe their thought structures, and I'm only a child, but I know this is wrong. And this is where you're seeing children act out forever. You're seeing them take drugs. You're seeing them as a revolt against not education itself, but the education curriculum, the dogma. It's worse than the Catholic Church ever was. And so I believe, and we talked about this offline the other day, I do believe, after interviewing these 18-year-olds at the White House during the 2021 debacle that happened in Washington, they were ready. And one young girl said to me, was doing a TV show, and she said, as a reporter, she said, we were born in technology. We didn't learn it. And we're just not putting up with the stuff we're hearing, even on both sides of the aisle. But for them at the time, what Trump was doing, it was a anti-establishment thing. I'm wearing this Che Guevara thing here today, just about that whole thing. What is this? It's, of course, he murdered people. I don't want to emulate him, but what is the beret? What does this symbolize? What does this mean? It's the structural opposition, and this is what's occurring in the chaos that's going to ensue in our country, because as Rudolf Steiner said, anything after the 20th century, the beginning of the 21st century, any program or policy that does not benefit mankind, including education, will not last. It'll disintegrate and fall apart. And this is why you're seeing policy after program after policy after program, all to crush and separate the child's development of their physical brain formation, the concepts that I'd love you to talk about, how the brain forms, and what these concepts that have developed between the change of teeth at 7 years old and 14, what's really happening, and what, if we take a look at education as being the arch enemy, almost the way the church was to keep people from not asking questions, and suspended animation, retarded processes. And if you couple this with abortion up to 14 weeks, 16 weeks in the evolution recapitulation of the human being from the beginning of the Saturn period till now, what is that 16 weeks? Where does that fall in evolution that the child is being formed from then to 35 years old? From conception to 35, we become complete. So where are they trying to terminate it? Where are they trying to stifle it? And the forces that, and I think we need to get to the teachers, because not just Waldorf education, they know there's something wrong. They know it's instinctively wrong. They have good degrees and nice jobs, and they can't oppose it. They're behind enemy lines with the teachers cartel, the education cartel. And so what is really occurring is a war on the development of the cosmos. They're trying to stunt and hold us back and stunt the human being. But I'm going to let you take off on that.
You're quite right. Education is the key. And when they came up with No Child Left Behind, later they had to put people in jail because it was so fraudulent. And that was the attempt to fix a system which they had already analyzed. And the report stated that the American education system is unredeemable. It must end. It cannot be redeemed. And then they tried charter schools as a radical transformation. They're just as bad. I ran a lot of charter schools. And I can tell you that education, because I was a Waldorf teacher, is what it's all about. And if you want to understand the true nature of the etheric body, one way is to look at the child as they grow by being a Waldorf teacher who stays with the child from 1st through 8th grade. And what we have in schools, you figured it out. I think you said when you were 8 or 9 years old, you read about the Big Bang and you said, well, that didn't happen. If you are above 10 years old and you believe in the Big Bang theory, then you are silly. I said to you the other day, because I was making fun of it, and I said, well, we know what the scientists were really thinking about when they came up with the Big Bang. It's nothing but an aggressive attack on conception. They don't understand creation. And so in Switzerland, they have a fake thing called the Giant Hadron Collider, or the CERN it's called, but Hadron Collider I think it's called. Anyway, it's fake. There's an old one there, and then they said they built onto it again, and they built onto it again. The third part's totally fake. And so they came up with the Higgs boson God particle. Then they found out that's fake. Then they came up with a few other God particles. They're all fake. They can't come up with anything through exploding things, speeding things up and exploding them.
Yeah. When analyzing the explosion. If I blow something up, it's not going to grow into a human being with all these fine, and most people know that, but they have nothing to replace it. Rudolf Steiner is much too difficult to just jump in at an older age without trying to be patient. But I'd like to address something that I don't think I invented it, but it came to me, and Steiner may have mentioned it. But I've been developing this concept myself on the creation, why abortion or why the termination of life, for non-life threatening reasons, etc. But what is in that? Well, for me, and what I've been developing is the idea, and I've studied it in my own actions, that creationism is perpetually happening. we conceive an idea and within our bodies. And I want you to talk about that as soon as I finish about how this is happening. We conceive an idea and then it starts to develop and to grow and take on its own life and go through similar stages that the human being goes through if we stick with the conception of an idea. I'm talking an original idea about your own life or thought. The hierarchies are going to drop it in. We may wonder and we get an answer that starts to grow. Doug, discuss that, because for me, I've been watching it and I'm noticing that the creation and conception, and if they could kill the physical form and say this is okay, beyond being holy or evil, the fact of what is the effect of this activity, and they're looking to kill the conception of free thinking ideas in our mind. Both are going hand, the word, the thought, the word, and the child as the word. This is more than it's a twofold attack.
Absolutely. I'll try to wrap up a few answers for a couple questions you mentioned. In ancient India, to this very day, they believe that a child in utero goes through 10 months of pregnancy. Those 10 months are the 10 incarnations of Vishnu, who is the sustainer God who never leaves us. He's the Christ of the Hindus, and essentially, even though they call him Vishvakarman and other names. But essentially, Vishnu goes through that recapitulation of all of the development of mankind up until birth. Once you enter birth, nowadays, because we were past the mystery of Golgotha, the earth has been redeemed. But let's imagine what it was like before the mystery of Golgotha. Had you been born, you were basically, especially because of the cosmologies, until the Messiah comes, you're going to go to a cold, gray, black coffin of a death and wait until the Messiah comes. That was basically the belief of all ancient peoples, that they didn't really have the capacity to overcome death, right? Now, let's look at the same development. You start in utero, and then you go down through India, and you go through Persia, and you go through Egypt, Chaldea, Babylonia, you go through Greece, you go to Rome, and you come to the Anglo-Germanic period, and here we are now. And the pendulum has reached the lowest point during the Roman times, and it started up now. Unfortunately, some people are locked in time. They're still obeying the legalism and the evil idea that a human can become a god like a Caesar, which is totally evil. And instead of going on the upswing of evolution, they didn't. Their momentum didn't carry them to the upswing. It's going down. And as you just mentioned the other day in a conversation with me, yes, the threshold to the spiritual world is open, but so is the other threshold. And I'm going to take that the next step to say, yes, the gates of hell have been opened through the technologies we've unleashed without any moral conscience. And the gates of heaven have been opened. So literally, you have the ability to see Christ in the etheric, angels, archangels, archai happening in higher thinking, higher feeling, higher willing. And for a child, you can look literally with what we give in the Eternal Curriculum book, which, by the way, is free PDFs. I'm not advertising to sell books. I give them away for free. Tyla is the person who helped make all of that possible, of course, my beautiful wife. And so we do this just to try to help so that people can get a perspective. Because until they get the perspective that you got at a very young age, there is really no hope for them, because mankind is being pulled down against their will by very strong forces.
The descent of man. We're at a crossroads. We're at a train station where we have to decide, or we're going south or we're going north. I hate to put those geographical positions in because it means something different. But at what point? And Rudolf Steiner does explain how the possibility to ascend is also connected to the probability of the descension of many human beings. And so when we ask ourselves to intervene, doing programs like this, educate, be helpful, can we stop that downward trend? Can we save souls? Can we enlighten people? We don't know until we do it. It will be up to them, as you said, freely, but knowing that so much of mankind is descending now into matter, into an evil place for the future, is, I tried for 20 years to think, knowing this, to think that maybe policy making, at least in the secular world, could change, at least neutralize. And then realizing it was probably a lost cause 20 years ago, I decided no, it is important to put it on the record, the attempt to try to not Jesus, holy roller, or even Steiner, but just those common sense, what St. Paul says, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. And so what is helpful, not good or bad? Again, we go back to what is helpful with St. Paul. In what may be helpful for you today to achieve your goals, what may be helpful for me, we may interpret them different. But right at that train station, there's one thing that will tempt people to take that train south, and that is what Steiner warns us of in our time. The greatest threat of our time is the love of evil. And when the heart chakra and the heart is pulled in, I want you to go off on that one. But really, at that train station, is it helpful? And how do you stop loving evil deeds when they're telling you they're good deeds, as they are politically today, or in through education is infected with it? Now those souls don't have the ability. They're being told different things than I was in the 50s and 60s in school, and you were. And now they're being told horrendous things that they have to believe, have to practice, and they're not allowed any freedom whatsoever. And it's ramping up quicker and faster and more evil against the human being than we've ever seen.
I believe that's absolutely true. And it underscores the necessity for discernment between truth and falsehood and lies and what are called specters and phantoms. And they become demons. They literally become laws, and they become what's taught in the children's textbooks, when in fact, who could possibly believe that the entire universe came out of a ball of matter small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, and then it exploded? That's stupid. And yet they're made to believe this. And I've talked with scientists, literally top scientists at the University of Michigan, leading the astrophysics department, and he couldn't even acknowledge that it has now been publicly told everywhere that there is no Higgs boson particle. He wouldn't acknowledge it. So I brought up, some of the things that, a few years ago have been discovered. No, he won't acknowledge anything, any new discoveries, and he leads the university. That's what our education's like. The subliminal programming is so profound, and then all the toxic bombardment leaves you so weak that, yes, there's only going to be a remnant of humanity, and they are the ones who see the evil and back off from it enough that it doesn't completely consume them. Because our time is not now to face the evil and win against it. We need cosmic help. We need all those hierarchical beings to help us to defeat evil, because we're not fighting against human evil. When you talk about, I like to call them names, let's just call them banksters and brokers who have been doing their evil since the time of Babylon, worshiping Mammon and Asmodeus and Beelzebub and other demons. This is a practice that is the oldest institution on the face of the earth. And so when we explain things to people in terms of who is actually controlling what's in their environment, who controlled the pharmaceutical pandemic, who controls the mainstream media, who controls the banks, who's going to control cryptocurrencies through the US Treasury, who are those people? They're individuals, but really they are a lineage of people who have been worshiping these demons for a long, long time. And they may not even know it. And so I always have to point out to people, right here, however many hours you spend on this each day, you are worshiping this as your God. Same thing with your computer, same thing with anything you do. So if your job is when you hate, then you're worshiping hatred. You're worshiping, I can name the demons. You don't know it, but every action you take is a statement of your faith. And what you believe, unfortunately, people think that faith is based upon unseeable things. No, it's not. It's based upon supersensible things, which can be perceived. And in the ancient past, native clairvoyance, which everybody had, could directly perceive in a transcendental experience beings beyond the physical realm, and they instructed them. That will happen again in the far future, as we've talked about. But right now, The question is, as we are looking, let's see if I can do this with my finger, as we went down, or at this point, we started to turn up, and some of us are happy as larks because we know that the apocalypse is a victory story, but others went down. And where do they go? Into their vices, into the path of perdition, the seven deadly sins. It's very simple. Really, some of the catechism of the Catholic Church is absolutely correct in its simplicity, and others is the most misleading patriarchal nonsense you could ever get because it doesn't give you an experience. It says only the experience of the people that we have considered priests, prophets, saints, the communion of saints, the popes. They're the holy ones. You're unworthy. You have to come to us and we mediate to the divine for you. Complete nonsense in our age. If you don't take control of turning up in that upswing, you will be pulled down. It's as simple as that. And that's what you were trying to, I think, insinuate with saying the ascent and descent of humans, because this is the question. This is the junction. You mentioned it before. This is the point. This is the railroad station. You better get on the right train, because one of those trains is going to a fiery, fiery place where when you try to indulge your seven deadly sins, remember, they can't be satiated. It's like the fires of hell.
And it's also something important so that judgment isn't being projected in our speaking. And I know you're not judging, but it can come off that way when we talk about all these things, especially if we wrap some religion, old religions in it. But everything, as Rudolf Steiner makes it clear that the individual, it's up to the individual. And so and I mentioned this in talks before with others on television, the individual and the freedom is less and less, is he having the time and the ability to make the decision in his heart. We are being so pressed in our time that there isn't the energy and the space, so everyone is operating automatically. And so this automatic thinking, automatic thoughts and trains of thoughts in our modern world when there is no time versus living out in the country or surrounded by 10,000 acres where you have some space. More and more in the cities, in our culture, more and more people are being forced, but at the same time, almost like in Auschwitz, when prisoners had seen Christ, they'd seen angels. We are going to see sooner than in the future. And Rudolf Steiner again makes clear he brought anthroposophy for the main reason is they were going to be locking people up soon in mental institutions like my grandmother because they were seeing the other side and the threshold has been crossed and humanity is not prepared. And Carl Jung and Nietzsche and Freud and all those that came before that tried to attempt to breach this and make it public, as we all know, it didn't go there. So there's been a war against the spiritual realm. And this is part of, again, that temptation. I mentioned it every show that I'm on. One of the temptations of Christ is bow down and worship me, and the kingdoms of this world will be yours. Anything, but do not believe in a spiritual world. Do not believe you have a soul. Do not go there. Jesus is a teacher. There is no cosmic Christ. And this is something I use in politics. I've used it in debates with congressmen when running for office. Do you have a soul? Right? When we're doing policy making, do you have a soul, Mr. So-and-so? And did the soul come from somewhere? And is the soul going somewhere or not? Or are you just a highly developed animal? Because I believe, and most of our nation believes, that we have a soul, that they don't understand the spirit. And this is spiritual realm with God. And we go there, we come from there and we go there. It's part of our policy making on earth. Even karmically. So they can't answer that question. And this is the question that I've asked, and I've just been tweeting out really pretty hard towards our governor, our senators here in Connecticut, Richard Blumenthal, Governor Lamont. Most of the liberal lefties are coming out of the Constitution state, and I've run against them. And I've said they're making abortion the issue instead of the economy. And this may be off topic, but it really isn't. And my tweet would be, folks may not be needing to kill their unborn children this fall and winter, but they're going to need money that you robbed from your energy policies that have uh, infected our government, and we have inflation now, and they can't buy oil, gas, and food. But the killer was in this tweet, which again, people would say you're an anthroposophist. How could you do this? People may not need to kill their unborn children this fall. And that took the debate of abortion, which is the Democrat, even if you're a Democrat listening, I'm sorry, when it's really the economy is the number one issue. So when I'm saying they may not need this, but they're going to need that, it's horrible. It's brutal, but it is true. And so people would think from, Jesus cult worship or Christian, oh, Joe, that's so hard. No, no. We need that in our government right now because our government is the religion. We're having a war of setting up a religion in this country, our government, that beyond our own control, that is going to dictate to us like the Catholic Church did in the Inquisition, dictate to us like the Puritans here in Connecticut and New England did. And so you can't make a move and breathe and think in thoughts, and they're exporting it into all of our agendas. So as we talk Rudolf Steiner, he touches all of this. For those listening who may not know, it is right here within our political environment, which is everyone is very curious. They're very interested in politics, but it's heavier than Rudolf Steiner. They have made our government policies so deep and the regulations so, and I've studied them, spending a year on the trail for U.S. Senate, 19 months on the trail for governor. And if you delve into those policies and the laws, if you can find the end of what they built against us, you'd be fascinated. Steiner's a cakewalk compared to our government, but this is how they have already built the infrastructure to take over our minds and our hearts and our will forces. And Americans, Europeans, everywhere, we need to fight back. And we need the armament from Rudolf Steiner's cosmogony to fight back. There will be no answers. There will be no ways that we can push back what they're trying to do through this apocalypse without Rudolf Steiner. All roads lead to Steiner to find the first causes of the universe, first causes of creation, because in every policy, the creation of it, and they're creating through black magic is what's happening at our U.S. capitals and our state capitals and our town halls across this country. They are creating black masses and evil beings put into our law, codified in our laws, and forced upon us. It's happening right there. And again, nobody wants to talk politics, but it wants to talk about you. And if you don't arm yourself, and I don't mean just vote Republican, there's good Democrats out there that are conservative or normal or whatever that do believe in God. As Kanye West said last night in Tucker Carlson, the media is godless, and they want to make your children godless and you godless. And then you can't talk these thoughts. They're hate. So Steiner is the only one. And as I've done politics, I've done it for myself for 20 years to say, I'm going to put it on the record. So when the apocalypse is here, and it's here now, I'll at least feel in my own conscience that I did what I could do to try to put it on the record. Somebody has to be there. And there are people out there that are doing this. But it is Rudolf Steiner who's given me the strength and through anthroposophy to know what was coming, and the things that you and Tyler have done, and John and others that I know through your own works and methods have been fighting this battle. We are in a war, and it's not just a revolution. There are those who, one of the commandments, do not steal. They're looking to steal souls. This is what education is about. They want to steal their souls by stealing their mind and stealing their liberty. I'll stop with my sermon over here right now, but politics is Rudolf Steiner. It is anthroposophy. It is religion. It's all put it in a blender and hit frappe. And the only way we save the earth and the world is through Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy.
Yes, or his spiritual science, which can be found in many ancient wisdom teachings. It can be found in your heart. It can be found in your being given to you as inspiration, revelation from the spiritual world right now. And so you've hit on so many good points. Yes, they try to turn all of us into automatons. And Rudolf Steiner is often quoted on Facebook as the one who says that they will develop the future an injection that will literally make you turn into an adult when you're a child. That's what they want. And why? Because you become, it used to be called, a secular humanist. When you say God exists, but I really don't believe it, and really the only God is inhuman, but I don't believe that anyway, so I don't have any beliefs. But that's called humanism. That's what we believe in. It's called secular humanism, and that's what they put on your forums. If you don't choose a religion, you become a secular humanist. Now it's a secular transhumanist,
Yes.
so that you will be controlled by machines, and that all of the evil machine thinking of all the people, millions and millions of hours of the work of all the humans that created the ability for me to use this phone and a few apps, was working for the devil. But the devil can be allowed to do your due. When St. Francis tamed the wolf of Gubbio, after that, the wolf was tamed and worked for the town that everyone was scared of because the wolf was eating them. But once you fed the wolf and put him to good work, it's like you don't kill the dragon. St. George doesn't kill the dragon, he tames the dragon. St. Michael doesn't kill Satan or Lucifer, he transforms him.
And this
And
goes
so
this
we'll do
goes to
that in the end.
Manichaean. This goes to transforming evil. So the things that I just spoke about in my little sermon on your show, I'll call it sermon on your show. It is the transformation of evil. And how do you transform evil? Number one method that Rudolf Steiner says is the only defense against Ahriman and his hosts and the evil that he's bringing in our time as a gift, if we awaken, is the consciousness of it. And so it can be put to use for helpfulness. We can't avoid it, but we can become conscious of it in its details in the Jupiter sphere, in the Venus sphere, in the Vulcan sphere, part of the cosmogony that is coming. What our decisions and our actions do today, what will you do different if you understood more? So it really is a walk of faith. But vision comes. What I found is once again, like Goethe, once you commit and say, I'm making a commitment that I'm going to be involved with my government, I'm going to be involved with my child's education. And if I see things in our time that are not right, that I'm going to speak out. Well, they're not going to let you speak out. And you're seeing this across the country right now. I believe Americans won't stand for it. Rudolf Steiner says we are too instinctive to allow it. It's our instinct, something that may not be helpful in the development of humanity, but yet it's something that can free us. And it's not just fighting against it, it's the identification. This goes back to some of occult powers. When something approaches you, you ask it for its, in the dream world, in the astral plane, you ask it for its credentials. It must name itself, Rumpelstiltskin. It must name itself. And this is why it's so important to identify. Don't call it evil. Go into all your government policies, all your programs. I'll be in a town hall over something that's happened, and I'll be at next week, and I'll walk in. I've been a counselor here in our town, and I'll say, this is the things that you're really doing. Let's discuss this. They'll give you 3 minutes to answer. So I said last week in a meeting, 3 minutes won't be enough for me at the meeting, so I'm going to hold a referendum and educate the public, which means you take the power away from the elected officials and you hold a referendum because they're not conscious of what you're trying to do. Hoodwink them with private investors, money from COVID, all the different things that are in the mechanization of our government. And so if you cannot identify, because you don't know the ropes, you don't know the information, and this is what they count on, to bury people with so much regulation and policies that you couldn't, even if you have a PhD, you couldn't approach them. You don't speak their language. And that's how they first changed the language. So they, like the apothecary from pharmaceuticals, you can't make it yourself anymore. It's stripped away. And this is what they're doing in our government. You can't even get involved. You just speak your opinion for 3 minutes on a microphone. You get to say how you feel, and you're a lunatic that's a Christian fringe, whatever, conservative Trump, whatever you are, and out the door you go. So you can't even debate, because you don't have not just the information, the language, and they have built a new language with this new religion. Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy and spiritual science is its own Christ language. Well, they have built a language for Satan. Pure and simple, that's what it is.
In the Gospel of Sophia, we gave you a variety of different languages or alphabets that can be used in spiritual languages that introduce you to cosmologies, because there's a bunch of cosmologies that you can approach. But in today's world, it's what you're talking about. We're under siege. This is the war in heaven come down to earth. We're fighting for the etheric, the life of the earth, the life of our own etheric body. And we must get involved at the grassroots level, regionally, to make the transformations that are necessary for ourselves and for our progeny, for our children. And so really it does come down to this. It is a question that if you do not have a cosmology, and if you never asked those questions that Joe asked when he was young, and if you didn't work them through and you didn't get an answer, guess what? You're living in tremendous fear, doubt, and hatred. And when you face the threshold, those forces are going to throw you back upon yourself, and then you will go to the automatic programming that the machines have all ready for you to steal your soul and your spirit, instead of going through that threshold by perfecting your soul, getting rid of fear, doubt, and hatred, and getting their virtues that supplant them, going through that threshold and becoming who you're supposed to be in your ascent. Because if you don't, folks, you could unconsciously be part of a descent. The descent goes into subhuman, the ascent goes into superhuman. So it is up to you to decide, are you going up or are you going down, or where do you stand? And the only answer that is going to help you through is a complete cosmology that transcends and explains time and space.
And I'd like to, I know we're getting close to the close of our show here. I'd like to make a statement to all those listening out there. We don't die. The only way we would die is to give up our free will, to give up our consciousness, to stop seeking, stop wondering. We are immortal, and there are forces that want to steal that immortality, to end that immortality. They can't have it, and they don't want us to have it. And they want to feast off of that and put us unconscious and enslave us. And that can only happen with our participation. And so no matter what station you're in, no matter what you know, how much you know, in anthroposophy or whatever your walk of life, center yourself and recognize and wonder about the world you came from, the world behind the world. That's all you need to do, is to wonder and ask the questions. Where am I from? And George Carlin does it great. God will do this and he will send you to hell, but he loves you. But God does love us. It's the love of Christ. It's the love of God. It's the love of the hierarchies that we just have to tune our consciousness. We don't have to get straight A's. We don't have to read every book. We don't have to know all of it. Just enough that we always had since we were little children will carry us through, that we love our neighbor. We love our children. We love. And that love will lead us. The power of love. I know it sounds like a Beatles song. Love is all you need, but it really, really is. Love in the conscious pursuit to recognize that the world is in danger, your family's in danger, you're in danger, and you're in danger from forces that hate human beings, and they are anti-human, and they want to destroy the human being. Knowing that, and God has allowed it for our growth, that God is with us, Emmanuel, God is with us, and don't fear, because we're, no matter what your age, we don't die unless we want to. Well, when I was very small, I would say probably 4 or 5 years old, my tree fort out in Tolland, Connecticut in maybe 1959, 1960. I just remember being young and looking up, laying on my back as the stars came out, and I was surrounded by nature at a very innocent time back in the late 50s, early 60s. And I just wondered, and I didn't know why no one else wondered. Where, and the two questions I had were, there's actually three. One more was more of a statement. I said, where did this come from? Everything, the trees, because I ran in the woods. We owned 40 acres surrounded by tens of thousands, undeveloped northeastern Connecticut. And I said, where did this come from? And the second question is, who put this here? And I wasn't going to be settled with God did this, and which I heard at home. And my sister was in catechism, and I wasn't there yet. But I knew, of course, it was God, whatever that meant. But I knew someone put this here, and I was astounded that it's here. The universe, the stars, the nature. And I've watched as we had hard winters and springs. And maybe it wouldn't have happened to me if I was raised in the city at a young age, but we were moved from the city right to the country when they bought the house when I was 6 months old, a farm. in the middle of nowhere. And the third thing that I heard, because as I pondered those questions very young, preschool, um, I was very aware. I don't know how. My mother told me later. She told me 2 weeks ago, "You're always weird. You just came to me with these questions that I couldn't answer." And I don't know why I had them, but the thing that came from them was, and this is before, of course, the internet and everything. You couldn't get information. I would walk around. I couldn't even read yet. But I knew that one day I would know the secrets of where this came from, and somebody knew, and it was out there in the world. And they also knew that my parents, the priests, I wasn't in school, so I didn't have a teacher yet. I knew they didn't know. And therefore I said, I'm going to keep a place in my mind, which I still have today, that nobody can enter. And I'm not going to believe anything, even if they force me to believe it and take tests on their doctrines or whatever I'm going to have to do in school, until I figure out and someone can tell me where this came from, who put this here, how did it get here beyond God? It had to manifest. And I was just surrounded with those questions, but I knew that that was going to be my answer. I'm going to have to wait and get older, and it won't be through. I knew it wasn't going to be through school, but it was somewhere in the world. Somebody knows these secrets, and the authority figures, including my parents, don't know, and they want me to believe something else. I'm not going to settle for it, so I'll have to start my acting career, which I did. I started to pretend and act. I'm sure a lot of people may have had these feelings, but from that moment, I gave myself, and it was at the same time, a couple of years earlier or a little later, I probably was in first or second grade, the TV show The Lost in Space came out. And I was fascinated that they had a force field that they could project around their spacecraft so nothing could get in and get them. So I connected my own little space in my mind that was mine with the force field magically, because I believed in magic as a little kid, and all the TV shows had Sinbad on, and the Sorcerer, and the Open Sesame was fascinated me with the Arabs and Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, how they would say a magic word and the door would open, the magic carpet. All of this was really alive in me, and I knew, and I had a left kind of logical brain. I didn't know this at the time, but I knew there were authorities and people that were going to make me believe. It was almost like taking a drug, and I wasn't going to take it. I was going to pretend. And at the same time, this is very important, I had the same personal experience of my grandmother, who had been recently released from an insane asylum in Norwich, Connecticut, and they finally had the psychotropic drugs to have her come home and live with my mother and us. And so I was raised with my grandmother, who was very medicated at the time, and we would have to go up and have my check on my grandmother to make sure she took her pills, because she'd pretend to swallow her medication, and my mother had to threaten her that she'd go back into that horrible place if she didn't be good and take, her pills. So we had to check under my grandmother's tongue, which started to make me believe even more, grandma even has to act and pretend because she doesn't want to. And with my grandmother also, she was from Sicily, born in Sicily. She would speak to women in the room, and me and my sisters, we'd lay in bed with her. She was like our mother. And, hi, Grant, what's going on? And she'd speak Sicilian to women who had bothered her for years. And she'd say to us, don't you see them? It didn't frighten me, but I knew she was talking to something or someone. And so a lot of experiences around me, again, it reinforced, there's something more. There's a world behind the world. Again, I'm talking 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. That was my own thinking. And from there, I went along with authority and education. I went to college, and my father had learned, he only went to 8th grade. So I was raised with a Marine Italian father, first generation American, who learned the trade just by doing it. And so I was kind of like working with my dad since a young age. He had a very bad lawnmower accident, basically cut his leg off at the ankle when they fused it on. In front of me it happened. So all of a sudden my father was incapacitated, and we moved to the city, and I was thrust into the city life at 8 years old, kind of becoming a parent. So authority again was weak. My parents my mother didn't drive, and my father was, working still as a contractor with casts on and fusion operations. So I became an adult and I had more authority in the times of mid 60s. I was able at that point to continue to develop my own thinking. And education at the time wasn't so formalized or hardcore. We had our teachers in grade school that were moms, and they taught. It wasn't the way education is. We were not forced to go to Catholic church, but we'd walk. My sisters and I would walk every Sunday. My brother was too little, but all in all, and then I saw the church and I knew Jesus, and I felt the holiness, and I knew it wasn't the Catholic per se, but it was Christ, and it was what the priests were doing. I didn't understand, and so I gathered another piece at 8 and 9 years old as almost an adult in the city of Hartford, and the mid 60s, the insurance capital of the world, very structured now. It came from the wild nature boy in Thailand in the woods to a structured environment, and was very close to the heads of the Democrat Party. The children were my best friends, and JFK came here, and John Bailey, who ran the Democrat Party. I ate at the table of the Quakers, and who basically developed the liberal agenda for America in the West End of Hartford. So